Welcome to the Pulse Wave podcast, brought to you by Metronome. I'm Virgil Verga, your host. All right, let's get going. So there's no such thing as safe. Have you ever noticed that when you're a kid, and if you're lucky enough, that the world just feels sort of safe? You don't even think about it. You're under a blanket, maybe your dad's downstairs watching the game, drinking a Budweiser or something, and you just know somehow that you're good. The boogeyman is not going to show up tonight. Then you get a little bit older and you start venturing out further, and the safety net shifts. Now it's teachers, maybe it's a cop driving by, the first responders who show up when something goes wrong. You trust a uniform, you trust the siren, and you trust that they're going to show up. Later in life, you start thinking bigger. You realize there's a military, there's a National Guard, there are systems, there are big machines, and there's lots of guns. Maybe that's what's keeping the real threats away. And then one day, boom, you grow up. Maybe you're a parent now. Maybe those cops, those teachers, those soldiers, they're not some faceless force. They're your friends. And you realize that they're just people. They're flawed, tired, overworked people with personal lives and bad knees and clearance paperwork that's 6 months overdue. And in that moment, you get it. There is no such thing as being safe. There's only being prepared. So let me ask you something. Were the people around the Guadalupe River in Texas prepared? Were the camp counselors briefed? Were the girls in those cabins warned? Were the officials with access to radar and gauges and national alert systems ready? Because when the sky breaks open and a wall of water starts moving like a freight train, the time for being safe is over. You're either prepared or you're not. And here's the thing. Preparedness isn't passive, it takes guts. It takes the right people in the right seats willing to take chances. Sometimes that radar's broken, sometimes the radar's broken, sometimes the funding is not there. So what? If you're in charge, you don't get to say it was too expensive. You've got to figure it out. You have to find a way because that's your job. That's why you were put there. This isn't about floods. This is about how we build systems. It's about how we lead. CEOs, agencies, counties, and countries. Do you invest in preparedness? Do you invest your family in preparedness? Or do you roll the dice and hope that you're not on the wrong side of the river? Because when that water rises, and it's gonna rise, everybody better know how to swim, or at the very least, they better know how to sound the damn alarm. All right, let's get going and bring the guys in here. First, we have an ex-Blockbuster video clerk who many times during the years he'd wish that he could just please be kind and rewind his life. He's the founder and president of Mount Indy. It's Tommy Weinert. Also on the show, he's got so many tattoos that if you wrung them out, you could fill all the ink toner cartridges in your office printers. He's the founder, he's an Army veteran, and is the CEO of Adjective. Welcome to the show, Rob Murtha. So guys, thanks for coming on again. You heard what I was talking about. I want to get into some things, obviously the tragedies that happened in Texas, and talk a little bit about that. I'm sure, at least at a very high level, you guys understand what would have gone on, and I want to share my screen here. Share. Boom. All right, so rescue crews continued on Tuesday to comb through parts of the Texas Hill Country devastated by catastrophic flash flooding over the 4th of July weekend. Over 100 people have died. As of Tuesday afternoon, the death toll across the 6 affected counties surpassed 100. Most deaths were in Kerr County, where officials said that 87 bodies have been recovered, including 56 adults and 30 children. Most of that happened in Hill County, where Camp Mystic was, where 20 or 30 young girls were swept away as this flooding happened. So, you know, how can something like this, when in Texas, in a matter of instance, 100 people die because of flooding, My question is, how unprepared are we, emergency-wise, across America for any other instance, be it AI, be it cyber, be it a hurricane? I'm just curious your thoughts here, Tom.
So, obviously this is just an absolutely horrific event. And so from a preparedness standpoint, I'll just share something that happened 2 weeks ago. So we were sitting in our office. Obviously, I'm in California, and wildfires here are something something we deal with every year. And I got an alert. We follow this app called Watch Duty, I think it's called, and it tells you where all the fires are around you. And there was a fire in the canyon, literally probably a quarter mile from my house, and you're just sitting helpless, like watching this fire like spread. They got it put out, but that moment for me of being like, there's literally nothing I can do, absolutely nothing I can do other than get out. And that's like what the app was saying, it was like, get out, evacuate right now. And you're sitting there like, holy crap, like, is my house going to burn right now? Like, is this going to turn into 100,000 acres? Is this going to ravage San Diego? So I've never been in a natural disaster. I'm sure you've been in, I know you've dealt with hurricanes and stuff, Virgil, but like for me, that feeling of like absolute helplessness and being like, how prepared should I be for if this does happen? And realizing I'm personally not prepared. Like, I don't have the tools and stuff on the ready to bolt. But I guess what I'm saying is this stuff happens so quick. And to your point, I do have to say the first responders and the firefighters and like seeing them like take care of that fire so quickly was just absolutely amazing. But I don't know how prepared you can be for stuff like this when nature sometimes is just like, hey, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I don't care what's standing in the way of what mankind has built. So my recent experience with it showed me like the feeling of helplessness, and I'm sure the people in Texas are feeling the same thing. Like, what are we supposed to do? And that's to your point. I think you're getting at is like, we expect systems in place to prevent us from these things, and I don't know. I don't know how to be prepared for something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, Rob. So I know that you are somebody who has a feeling that you can ultimately mitigate risk, and I know that's about to where you're about to go.
I was going to bring up our conversation from the other day. I mean, first off, like Tommy was saying, this is a horrible situation and a horrible outcome. And honestly, just like in the face of chaos, it's amazing that we have like all of these people that just always happen to step up and come out of nowhere and like really save lives, save the day. The rescue swimmer story, all of like the unnamed, unknown first responders are out there sweating, digging, looking, trying to help. We saw the same thing in the Appalachians with that kind of incident where there wasn't a single kind of governing body that's responsible for this stuff that had nearly any impact compared to the local community that just like stepped up and actually cared about people and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, like the whole situation puts everything into perspective. And I told you, like, I'm kind of just an anxious dude. One of my functions when I was deployed was really force protection and making sure service members didn't get hit by IEDs, or we could intercept risk here and there. And anytime something did happen and like it kind of slipped through the cracks, it was like that feeling where it was like that was something that could have been modeled. There were signatures for something that we could have fixed. We could have figured this out. And I feel the same way about my life and how I kind of try to keep my kids and family safe. Right? I mean, it's funny because it brings me back to like pre 9/11. I think everyone was just kind of flowing. It was like after the 80s. Like no one really cared. Nobody really knew it was out there. Now we have so much information. We have so much data. We kind of are exposed to more stories, but the systems are just as kind of feeble and like not dependable. And the reality is like nobody really cares about your local community's situation other than your local community. There's entities with acronyms and there's like things that theoretically are funded to do certain stuff, but like not only is it too chaotic, but they're just like like anything else, if they're a national asset, they're not incentivized to care that much, right? Like one of the grossest things I've seen with this whole incident, and you see it with every incident, and it's just human nature, right? People take advantage of the situation. They're like, oh, this administration defunded this, and, whose fault is it? It's like, in reality, I don't care about like the political aspect of it. Like everyone's going to try to take advantage of a situation to gain progress. But it just reminds me that like ultimately nobody cares but you and your local community. And the only people who are going to solve this problem are the people that are closest to it, period, dot. Everyone else is trying to extract value from it. Everyone's back on their phones trying to like live their lives and, get ready for sports betting with this like NFL season coming up. I mean, it's sad, but it's a reality. And I think that the faster you can arrive at that reality, the safer your family is going to be, and the more mindful you'll be of events like these and be able to intercept risk for you and your loved ones.
Yeah, I agree. You've got to try. You've got to think of what the potential emergencies could be and figure out how you could try to mitigate those as a family. Because you're right, the further out you get from the possible incident, the less anybody is going to care.
Well,
so I want to show you guys.
Virgil, can I like just take it back one more time, like
Please.
For one more second, like putting two realities into perspective, right? There's this really kind of Gucci emergency services entity that's funded, and they exist, but you don't really know what their software is. You don't really know what their kind of data frequency and throughput is, how much intelligence they're able to acquire for weather-related things, for any type of threat. It's all behind a wall, right? It's like you're just supposed to assume that this random acronym entity is going to protect you and your loved ones given this crisis that's happening, whatever that crisis is. Let's say it's weather-related. Do you trust that, or do you trust the company that's going to go bankrupt if they don't provide the right insight to protect you and your family and they have insurance backing them? If they don't provide that insight to save your kid from this camp completely getting washed away, that company is going to get sued and all of the founders' assets are going to be taken. I trust that because they're incentivized, right? That's a lever that we can actually control. It's not this random, opaque acronym entity that has no transparency about their software, about their efficiency, about who's actually staffed, what they're capable of analyzing. It's just trust this random thing that historically hasn't risen to the occasion. I think there's an opportunity here where there's like a lot of, I don't want to say like trying to stuff some business case for this, but honestly a business case would protect lives because those people would be incentivized. Insurance would absolutely butcher them for the rest of their lives if they weren't able to intercept this risk and it was like outside of an SLA or something.
Without a doubt. Listen, I agree with you. And when you talk about the intersection of a government program or a private run company doing that same program, this is just my opinion, if they're done fair and down the right lane and there's no cronyism going on, the private company is going to win every time. I want to show you guys something. This is unbelievable. So this is how fast water rises. Check out this. This is how fast this water rose in Texas. Over 20 feet in 45 minutes. I mean, you've tried to fill up a swimming pool before. It's just sort of inconceivable that something can happen this fast. So I wanted to show that to say that, clearly, I'm not throwing stones because that is something that's, I don't want to say insurmountable, but pretty close to it. But then also, we're sort of just touching on this. Is government prepared or are they a step behind, right? So some of the things that happen, and the reason I said I wanted to show that video first is because, clearly that's a big undertaking. But there were misses, right? So Kerr County, Texas is long recognized as a flood-prone area. They even called it Flash Flood Alley. So in 2017, they were going to get sensors and sirens along that exact river where that camp was, and they decided not to do it because it was going to cost too much money. That was 8 years ago. It was $2 million it was going to cost them to build this system. I heard this morning where they said that, well, Locally, they couldn't afford it, but now the state, we're going to step up and we're going to do that. So there's nationwide breakdowns too, right? Wildfires in Hawaii, in California with a loss of water. There's just critical gaps in emergency notification. Underfunded and outdated. Most local alert systems are decades old and still running on analog tech. There's not a passive sensor to be found, probably in a locality in America, that's worth a damn. Modern tools are ignored in terms of AI-driven early detection, auto alert platforms. I mean, what are they waiting for to fix all the stoplights across America? Implement some AI and you're going to solve that problem. The bottom line is that there's a tech gap, governance and execution failure. So, I mentioned this earlier on, which was, hey, it costs too much. Well, it's your job to figure out how to get those tools and to figure out how to help your community. People need to educate themselves, not just us, not just citizens, but the people that are elected officials. They have to understand that there's grants, there's federally matching grants. You've got to do your homework, you've got to do the legwork, you've got to meet other people in your state, you've got to meet the private companies, and you have to connect the dots. You can't make the excuse that it costs too much money. I understand the $2 million is a lot of money, but I'm going to do a really quick calculation in my head. I'm in Kirk County, it's 2017. I am someone who is voted in who actually is worth a damn, and they say it's $2 million to put these sensors in and it's going to save lives. And I say, well, that's a lot of money. And then I look at it and say, okay, does this really cost $2 million? It probably costs $700,000. And I'm going to do my research to see how I can get this money. Maybe I'm going to get federally matched dollars. Maybe I have to go talk to a different office in the States to cobble these funds together, but I'm going to get it done because it's in the best interest of my constituents. That's why you were voted in. Not to say, oh, shucks, there's not enough money in the coffer that I can frickin' waste. You know what? Because they spent $2 million on something. It just wasn't on the sirens to save all these people's lives. So I'm curious, right? So Tommy, you've seen firsthand, you hire people left and right for companies as well as the government itself. It takes the right people in the right places to understand how to get a job done. What are your thoughts on, and listen, I know this is just our opinion, but that's what it's like. So when you're talking about hiring in municipalities, this is what happens when they cut corners. So I'm curious your take there.
I mean, loaded question. I mean, look, the issues are, good government is not seen, right? Like the systems that we're building to defend the nation aren't seen, right? Like these warning signals aren't seen until tragedy happens. And so much of money that is spent in government isn't seen. And I think, look, this is not a political statement, but like the budget is political. Everything is political. Everything in government has become absolutely political. And to the point, at the beginning of this, there's political posturing over, these issues, which is gross. But I think at the end of the day, what every American wants is to be safe and have systems in place that protect us. And knowing that a lot of money is going to be spent on these systems that may never be used. Like, I think that, like, look, I'm in San Diego. I love San Diego. I love California. I love it here. The roads are shit, right? The infrastructure across the nation, like, haven't had major upgrades since Eisenhower put in all the expressways. Like, I don't remember what the exact number is, but it's something like 50% of the bridges in the United States are like totally at risk of collapsing. And that may be a high number, but anyways, if it was even 5%, right, like it's too many. So infrastructure in the United States isn't sexy, and it's something that we don't spend a lot of money on. In hiring, like, honestly, like, you're caught up in the bureaucracy. No matter how good of the person that you hire, no matter how good of the intent to help, you're always stuck at the speed of government, at the speed of acquisition, and it takes forever. I'll just give one example. The first contract I ever worked on was was BRAC, which is base realignment and closure. So the United States has millions upon millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars of closed military bases that they cannot transfer because they can't get it through the environmental regulations to transfer. These are bases that were closed in the 80s for some instances. And we hired unbelievable scientists and geologists to work on these projects. Every single one of them is like, I love the job, but it moves so damn slow, right? Like, to think that we've got bases that we've closed in the 80s and we still haven't been able to sell them, it's just absolutely crazy to me. But I guess my point is that everyone we hire has the intent to help and wants to make this a safer place. They want to build cool shit, whatever it may be. But everyone is throttled by the speed at which the government moves.
It's slow.
It's very slow. I mean, to your point, and Rob's point earlier, it's just the politicization. I love the fact that in my mind, and I don't know if this is true, but in my mind, government and politics are completely separate. Like, I don't consider politicians government, right? When I think of government, I think of the post office. I think of, obviously, the DOD. I think of all civil servants. And I think of a lot of people who are not political. And it's just, it's a shame that the budget is an incredibly political thing. And a lot of times the budget, I think, may tend to, what can we see that we're building versus we need to spend money on this critical infrastructure that nobody is going to ever see, but that's the point.
Without a doubt, yeah. So, moving to Rob, so in Ukraine, they can detect, half invisible drones and artillery strikes with AI before they ever hit. Why can't we trigger alarms for a flash flood in America? Do you think it's a tech issue or incompetence at mass?
Oh my goodness, yeah. No, it's so funny because it kind of goes back to, I think on the last episode we touched on very briefly like that article I was writing about like America sucks at cronyism, and just like everything, just like the compounding effect of like one politician or one decision maker being socially engineered or not being smart enough to do something. Just is insane, right? It spirals out of control. And I think that's what it is, right? Like we had the architecture to solve the problem that we're talking about with like this flooding like 25, 30 years ago. Easy, right? Arguably, we had it 80 years ago. If you have $2 million budget, that's 20 years of paying somebody to stare at the river and be able to phone in if there's any issues. You know what I'm saying? And you could even get them a gator and they can drive up and down the river. It could be really complex and cool from a workflow perspective. Like, I think that's another problem too. Like, we're so kind of aligned to these like really lame crony kind of like, and the leadership, I think across the country, right, is just like very unaware, right? Like, there's so many generations of technical evolution that's occurred that they're just unfamiliar with the tools that they can lean on and the levers they can pull. They just don't really know how to like put these things together. So like, and they're also, I think they're also kind of insecure in the way that they're like, oh, I have to find something super technical. Like, we were joking about that random guy that gets hired that watches, or girl that watches the river, and they're like, oh no, it has to be cool. It has to be something we can like brag about nationally, and then it just never gets done, and then something like this happens. And that's like the vibe, right? And that's also cronyism. Maybe it's like cronyism / apathy / the culture of these organizations where they're just not focused on solving problems. Honestly, I think the future generations are going to be the ones to unpack and kind of untangle all of this chaos. We've had so many years of complacency and runway ahead of competitors, and our currency has really given us a lot of breathing room to just be kind of self-defeating. But I think it's going to catch up to us, and it really is. I think, in my opinion, let's say like you kind of acknowledge one of the craziest excuses where it's like we don't have $2 million to pay for this like siren system. Sure. Then like talk about creativity. How can you teach creativity and problem solving and the maximization of someone's time that they can invest in whatever this large system that they're supposed to be governing is, whether you're like local mayor, alderman, whatever it is. It's like you have 8 hours a day, at least five days a week, right? That's a crap ton of time, especially in AI hours, right? that's like an obscene amount of time. Imagine what that person could have done if they partnered with a local school and said, hey students, 600 years ago, you could have went to war at 16 and like fought a battle and commanded like a large kind of element, but we kind of treat you with like little padded gloves now. How about we actually create projects for schools where they can start building some of this infrastructure that's tied to the local education costs? Like the thing that they're missing as young, awesome participants in our society is wisdom. We have that. Let's like define the problems using our wisdom, and then partner with like local schools to build out some of these capabilities. Plus the schools will benefit from it. Kids will actually be focused on doing real things with their time, and they'll potentially be able to spin it into future, little businesses and stuff. Like, and why is that so like creative? Why is that like such an interesting idea? That should be default across our country. Like, why do we accept that, our politicians locally are like unimpressive, and then our schools literally teach our kids nothing? It makes no sense. So there's, I think across the spectrum, there's so many little efficiencies where that $2 million wouldn't even be a question or a thing, had people been creative and really leaned into the hours that they have to use every single day to solve problems.
Can I ask you a question, Rob?
Yeah.
And Virgil, too. Two questions. So the first one is, you said this in the last podcast, and it kind of sat with me a little bit. You said America sucks at cronyism. And like, but whenever I hear cronyism, it's like, it's negative. Like, there shouldn't be cronyism. So what do you mean by we suck at cronyism?
No, I love this. So let me define it. And the kind of way I go into it in this article is like, my vibe, I'm like very kind of blunt and stuff and kind of like controversial. But like, so like China, or let's say the CCP, they're kind of very rigged up, very tooled up, what we would model as cronyism, right? As from a governance perspective. But they're completely vertically integrated, and they are all striving towards the same outcome. And they also have really interesting cultural attributes where it's like, yeah, we'll do 24-hour shifts. We'll have 2 12-hour shifts, and we'll build this thing in 3 days. That would take America 3 years. That is like, and they probably cut corners and convince people at dinner of things, but like they build something in 3 days. Our thing is like, hey, there's a huge risk that someday these camps are going to be swept away. The water's going to come through. We think we can build a system for you. Can you give me a SAL for that? Can you give me a quick estimate? Then it comes in and it's like 5 times more than they expected. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Don't really know if I want that. Can I cut a couple of things out of it? And then all of a sudden someone else intercepts. They find out that this alderman is in control or influencing a $2 million budget. And they're like, hey, you know what you really need? You need all these signs in this old solar field you used to have that nobody needs or cares about, that doesn't affect anything. And then they literally just launder this money to some random local friend. And the problem with that is like in that isolated situation, it's like, oh, that's cool. But like, or it's like, oh, I don't really care. It doesn't affect me. But when you scale that out across our state governments or city governments or federal government, it's all these little like low value, low ROI, low impact, homey deals in the alleyways. You end up with our situation. You end up with infrastructure from the 1930s, people that are pretending they understand tech that can't build anything after decades of trying. You end up in this situation where it feels like nothing ever changes, and then all of a sudden you have a Sam Altman, and it's like, oh cool, America did something. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. Altman's like 0.00001% of our population. Everybody else can be building interesting things. Obviously, everyone can't be OpenAI, but like if we had like a better value versus impact versus cost mentality and a stronger, more kind of self-aware culture, I think the stuff we can produce as a society would freak us out, and we would be the America again that like everyone fears, wants to work with, is inspired by. It just hasn't been that way, I think, for like 20 to X amount of years. It's always been like everything feels like we pay 5 times the cost for a clearance item. We pay 5 times retail for a clearance item all the time, and then it doesn't turn on. Like, why is that the outcome of every like government output? Like, it freaks me out. And it's something that like challenges me every day. I want to be the opposite of that when I can. Yeah.
And then just briefly, Virgil, you might know this too, but like, look, in the insurance world, in the energy world, in the private sector, there's so much like risk mitigation and risk tolerance and actually evaluating risk is such a business. I'm just curious, because I don't know the answer to this. Like on the government side, like, who is evaluating that risk? Like in this instance of like flood zones and like from a national perspective, looking at the actual risk, like who is looking at the risk?
It's it's the Department of Preparedness, emergency. There's probably 3 or 4 different departments in locally, county, state, and they probably all have their fingers in it somewhere. My read of what Rob's saying is that if we're gonna cut corners and have cronyism, we might as well have results.
Yeah.
Like China does. So we cheat, we cut corners, and it still takes us forever, and either don't and maybe not get it done.
Well, I think, and just to respond to that, I think that, in my opinion, because we're based on a capitalist construct, capitalist society, it's in our ethos, it's in our blood. I don't think that will ever work. America will never functionally work as an authoritarian element, because we'll always try to force free market principles in there, and it'll be at conflict with whatever the crony authoritarian thing is. I actually think, and we'll never get there, right? Because everyone needs to eat and get paid and whatnot, and everyone needs to thrive off the cronyism. I get that. I'm self-aware. But like, if we wanted to see just like the sun's up in the sky and everything's growing and we have all this great, like, inspiring kind of development again, we need to lean into what a real free market is and some decentralized risk assessments, decentralized rewards, right? Like, if you can meet certain criteria, this form of AI governance is going to cut you a contract, right? Like, I think the first step towards that too is like every single federal or state RFP that gets cut to anyone or deployed should have an AI assessment, and the humans that are assessing it shouldn't be able to see what that AI assessment is, and they should make that public. So if this collection of humans award a contract to this like super rando kind of used to, just hired the kind of director of ops that used to work at this organization, and they somehow got awarded the contract, that's great. But if the AI was like, no, they're actually, terrible, they don't have the past performance, it's super high risk, they've never delivered based on all these CPARs for these other areas, we think you should go with one of these companies and these are the percentages we're scoring them, that should be public information. I don't know why it's not. Like, everyone's so scared of transparency and honesty. Unfortunately, that's what built America. We just did everything better, faster than people, and we were like more creative about it. And now we have AI, we have blockchain, we have all these interesting things to actually spin up that architecture really inexpensively and start getting more out of our acquisition arms for all these different types of government agencies.
So the EU censorship has sailed. So the EU just passed a law, this week or at the end of last week, but bing! EU disinformation code takes effect amid censorship claims and trade tensions. As of July 2025, Europe's Code of Conduct on Disinformation is officially in effect. What was once a voluntary self-regulatory framework is now locked into the DSA, the Digital Services Act, requiring VLOPs, or very large online platforms, and very large online search engines to meet tougher transparency and auditing obligations aimed at stamping out disinformation. Full compliance with the code now counts as a key risk mitigation measure and marker of DSA compliance. And come audit time, tech platforms will have to prove they're sticking to their commitments. So, when you look a little bit deeper, what does some of this stuff mean? So content flagged under EU's definition of disinformation may be automatically demoted or removed, even if it's scientifically accurate or politically relevant in the United States. Platforms are implementing DSA-compliant content filters at the infrastructure level, meaning that content uploaded in the U.S. could be throttled globally. Companies must now conduct annual third-party audits of their moderation systems, including those based on AI, to evaluate disinformation mitigation. The audit trail is permanent. If your tool misclassifies a topic or used in a way that EU disapproved of, you could be fined 6% of your company's global turnover. Yes, global. So basically, what could happen here is, Tom, is a lot of the cleared I wrote this question down here. A lot of cleared recruiting happens on platforms like LinkedIn and GitHub, and they're forcing these platforms to monitor what they call risky terms. So what happens when profiles that are talking about SIGINT or cyber warfare or defense programs get flagged or hidden? Because those are terms that the EU potentially could find that are harmful or disinformation. So, what do you think about that when you're talking about potentially profiles and hindering your ability to find sort of the right people based on these new EU laws?
So this is the first time getting any details on this, obviously, but so this is what's shown in the EU, right? So my initial reaction is, unless I'm working overseas stuff, this isn't going to really affect the local search, right, in the United States. But I will say that it sounds like the intent of this is right, but again, it's all in the definitions. It's all, I don't know where this is coming from or why they're putting it in place. Look, even the three-letter agencies in the United States are highly concerned with this information. I mean, they have been for a while. I mean, since I started Mount Indy, one of the first projects we worked on was around, deepfakes and disinformations. So I understand the intent, but it all comes down to the definition, how loose the definition is. I mean, are they looking at, absolutely complete, are they looking at deepfake stuff or stuff that's obviously put out there to create chaos? Or is this going to turn into political stuff? You know what I mean? So I think anything around freedom of speech, people freak out about. I do believe the intent is in the right place, but it's all about how this gets carried out. And surely there is going to be, casualties from this that, weren't doing anything wrong. So I don't think it's going to affect my search, but, and the other thing I will say too is EU, they've got way stricter laws in regards to privacy, GDPR, right? And I'm waiting for that to hit the US. It hasn't hit here yet, but those are types of laws that I think would have way more effect on my search than this type of stuff. Again, I think the intent is in the right place, but we'll see how it plays out and what they're actually throttling, what kind of information they're not letting get through. But yeah.
Sure. I think it was a little bit more here. So when I said earlier that how it could affect you is that platforms are implementing DSA compliant content filters at the infrastructure level, meaning that some US GovTech firms could throttle specific terms globally because they don't want to bifurcate what's happening across the entire European Union, which is half of the world, and the other half of the world. So I'm not saying potentially that could happen. So Rob, I'm curious your take here. There's someone that defended free speech for America.
No, I think it's awesome. And Tommy, especially with the big, the major recruiting focus with Mount Indy, I find it fascinating because resumes are so kind of PII rich, and there's never been a really great, there's programs that exist for sanitizing them and controlling them, but early on in the LLM days, I ran some interesting little experiments because it's so easy to get resume data, and you can just build a crazy repository and seeing what you can extract from all that resume data. I mean, it's really wacky. So I love the safety behind GDPR and some of these privacy related things that are being pushed. I think the challenge in the EU with this new piece, what is it called? The DSA, the Digital Services Act. Yeah, I think anything that something is ideological and it's some governing body that's hey, we know what's green and what's red, I think makes people concerned. And so I actually went down this pathway. There's a really awesome partner of mine. I'll link up with you after this, Virgil, and see if he's willing to come on the show at Air University. I kind of started working on this thing called ideological resiliency, and it was supposed to combat something like this for service members because they get caught in this disinformation, crazy, social media feed thing. you really can't tell someone something is disinformation or not, because they either kind of have confirmation bias and they like align and like are grateful that you confirm their bias, or they're like, you're shilling for whatever the opposite of my perspective is. So the whole idea around ideological resiliency is like more focusing on the person and them building their own framework to understand patterns, right? Where it's like, this is fraudulent equivalence, this is gaslighting, this is another thing. That is actually something you can impose on a society and equip them to feel more confident in what they're reading and make their own decisions. Anytime you try to say like, based on the regime, this stuff isn't, this isn't accurate information, and it kind of is, and there's like things that prove that, it gets so messy and it fails every time. It just makes people not trust the larger system, which is unfortunate. But, and another thing, last thing I'm going to say before I kick it over is like, if this is such a big concern for governments, especially in Europe and stuff, like, why aren't they leaning into governing and holding telecom companies accountable for all this like synthetic spam we get? We get like a ton of deepfake type stuff, misinformation in text messages. To me, there's like 500 other laws left of, the general population can't see this content because they're too like dumb to interpret it and realize that it's not real. There's like all this like, hey, let's hold like these armies of scammers that are stealing billions of dollars from vulnerable individuals annually. Like, where is that kind of focus on information and holding the telecom companies and other communication companies accountable?
Yeah, without a doubt. So one of the also ideas here, Rob, is that like an OSINT feed could get shut down or downgraded by some AI EU, trained bot. That's absolutely possible here when you're talking about all these, large service providers. That's where those feeds go through.
Yeah, that's an implication. If you want to unpack that from an intel perspective, kind of reverse engineering narratives kind of gives you the so what that a larger, component is trying to get at. And that unpacks all types of interesting doors to kind of go down and investigate that could lead to other things. So you're totally right. There are legit national security implications for this. But like anything, see what it looks like when it shakes out. It could be surprisingly very beneficial, and people can start to have more authentic conversations if they get it right. Who knows?
Without a doubt. Appreciate that. So, moving on. Is it Calendly or malady, guys? So I'm somebody who early on I had an administrative assistant, and she started to help me with my calendar. I thought it sounded like a great idea. And very quickly I realized that not having full control of my calendar drove me nuts. When I would wake up in the morning, or I'd look at my calendar at night and I would see an appointment in there that I physically didn't put in myself, I would start shaking. Because I need to know what my day looks like. So when I see someone with their, give their Calendly invitation and say, go put something on my calendar, I'm scared for them. So I did a little bit of research last night or the night before, and I was curious what other people thought about this. And there was this fellow who wrote this little article on LinkedIn. And it was interesting because it brought up some things that I didn't think about. He said he used to make people really mad. He would send them his calendar link all the time. Why don't you book a call here, I'd say. I thought I was being nice, but I'm pretty sure they thought I was a jerk. See, I was just sending my calendar link, and it made people think I was busy. It's funny he says that, because that's the impression I get when someone sends me that. I'm like, oh, you're so busy. You got a picked spot on your calendar. So it made me feel like I was plugging into their system. So basically this guy says, hey, when you use these tools, if you do it wrong, it's definitely going to make you look like you think you're some busy person. But really what you can do is you don't send a cold link, and you do it like many other sales calls, which is you give them options. Hey, I'm free on these days, or you can choose a Calendly link, whatever you think. So for me, I am fully on the side of managing my own calendar. I don't want anything to do with these services, but I can see how they could be beneficial to some folks. I'm curious your take here, Tom, on these tools like Calendly and those of the such.
So this is a hilarious article. I haven't seen it, but I think exactly the same way. Like when a peer of mine, when they would say,
yes,
schedule a time on my calendar, it's like, who the fuck do you think you are? That was my reaction. If it's someone above me, I'm like whatever. But again, like usually I'm trying to get on somebody's calendar, so like I appreciate it. I agree with everything they're saying in this. It's how you do it. Here's when I'm free, but if it's easier for you, you can also just book directly on my calendar. But yeah, it is a little power thing. A little tip to recruiters out there. So I live and die by Calendly. I think it's very important. But what we found is cleared candidates will not click a link. Not all of them, but we've heard this from them. They won't click a link if they can't see the URL. So a lot of times what we do is click my calendar here, and it's a hyperlink. And we were getting a really low, engagement from that. And we had candidates tell us, like, yeah, we're trained not to click on links, A, and B, if we can't see the URL, I'm sure as shit not going to click on it. So we started putting the actual URL to the Calendly, and it's a much higher engagement. So that's a little tip there. But also, I always thought it was funny, kind of like what you said at the beginning. Like, I know a lot of younger in their business entrepreneurs, and the first thing that they do when they get an assistant is they outsource their calendar to them. And I'm like, what are you, like, I understand why people do it, but I've always thought that is really kind of odd. A lot of people are in that whole inbox zero thing where they want every single email cleared out. And but anyways, so I agree. It's all in the way that you do it. And there is a really weird power imbalance when you're asking someone to book on your calendar. So you have to be really careful with how you use it. Because it's a nonverbal thing. That is an incredible example of nonverbal communication in an email. Like, you are signaling something by doing that, even if you don't intend to. So I got to read that article. That's awesome.
Without a doubt. I think for me, the most startling is when you happen to have an email from somebody, either you sent whatever, they replied to you, and you're not even asking for a meeting, and they're not asking to meet you, but there's still that link in their footer that says click here to schedule a time. That to me is just outrageous that somebody would allow somebody to schedule time in their calendar for no reason. Rob, what's your take here?
What do they say about contrast? Contrast is good. I don't know. No, I kind of agree. I understand and appreciate the perspective from like the human and like doing good by other people perspective, but I'm definitely. I don't know. I'm definitely like I'm just like trying to process this really quickly, just because Virgil, we've chatted a ton, and Tommy, we've chatted too. Like, I'm totally like an ADHD psychopath, and literally to the point where I don't clear my inbox out because I don't want to forget something. Like, I want to stumble upon an email that I misinterpreted because I skimmed it, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I actually have to do this thing. So it's like I like have this really bad mentality of just keeping things fresh until I really need to interact with them because I know I'll forget it. And so I have all these weird tendencies, and also let's combine that with like the way that I've kind of pivoted my company a little bit. It's productized services, so I try to spend as little time off calls as possible so that I can produce output and outproduce W-2s. That's like my whole thing. It's like generate. I need to be working for people and solving problems, not talking to them and smiling at them. That's like my vibe, unless I'm doing business development to get new clients. But And that's been a real challenge because I'm not good at blocking my calendar, but I'll have huge swaths open on my calendar where I can be flexible and take a call if I need to. But I agree. It's good to be in control of your calendar. I think one of the other issues when I do like try to organically coordinate time, again, going back to the ADHD thing, this happened to me recently, and I actually met with somebody that I forgot to set something up with this morning, and it was like the best call I had in a really long time. I'll be introduced to someone, and it'll be like, okay, you need to coordinate a calendar invite, and it's like, how does this range work for these 3 days? And they're like, oh, it doesn't work for this, and you forget like all of a sudden, and then you never talk to them, and 10 days go by, and you're like, wait, wasn't I supposed to talk to this person? So Calendly to me is like some way to intercept risk there, where it's like, not trying to offend you, I'll totally forget about this conversation because my brain doesn't work well, but please get something on our call or on my calendar because I absolutely need and want to talk to you. Like, it's my biggest fault. And
that's a great point.
I literally have like time tracking physical devices. I just wrote an app that does it in your browser. Like, I'm a psychopath. Like, I'm doing everything I can to minimize this risk. But anyway, that's kind of my feedback. I think it's fluid. Someday we're going to have our agents talk to each other, right, to deconflict these types of things.
Of course. Sounds like somebody just turned on their fan. Great feedback.
Let me say one more thing really quick. So, and I got to get my cord from my computer, but a new sales trend that I actually hate is salespeople are just putting time on your calendar. They're sending you calendar invites, which I'll see these on my calendar. I'm like, what the hell is this? Absolutely hate that. And then the other pet peeve I have is red receipts on emails. I don't know if you got, like, when a salesperson asks you to send a red receipt on their email, that's like another passive aggressive nonverbal that I just can't stand.
Yeah, they're like stealing your time.
Sorry. Not gonna happen. And that's happened to me too. It's I look at it and I'm like, gosh, how do I not remember this?
I just throw it in
I
the
had to
spam.
talk to this person. Oh yeah. And then finally I realized that they just abducted my calendar.
Totally.
All right, moving on. Shorts, attention span. So, guys, are shorts suitable workwear? The debate over shorts at work has heated up this summer as professionals attempt to stay cool amid multiple heat waves. If styled professionally and appropriately, New York Times fashion critic Vanessa Friedman approves, writing that shorts can add a bit of surprise and cool to what could otherwise be a fairly staid look. Millennials and Gen Z and Gen X tend to be pro knee freeing, while most boomers disapprove. According to Wall Street Journal survey, beach, jean, and biking shorts, however, are generally no-goes. Rob, what do your legs look like? What do you think about this?
I'm always in shorts, man, but that's because I'm in grind mode. I'm just focused on building things for people. I understand there's like a certain workplace culture that I respect. So if somebody did have that as like one of the things they wanted to incorporate, I'd be down for it. I mean, I'm kind of a weird one on this. Like, I love the comfort and I love just being like a mad scientist and building stuff if you're in that vibe. But also, I think like there's big portions of society. I joked with somebody about this the other day. I was like, are cubicles and like office work going to like ironically come back into style because people miss like the whole like little like so and so brings their favorite cake in on Fridays before the holiday. Like there was some like weird kind of fun playfulness there. People like The Sims, right? There's like the loneliness is way worse than like having to report somewhere every day and interact with people. Cause like, I mean, those are all fun little adventures. Even if you can't relate to them, it's still like a fun story you can talk about at like, the bar or the little after work thing. I think society's lost a lot of that. So I think at some point in our lives, Gen A or generations after them, they're going to reinvent the cubicle office, and it's going to be this like diorama that's like ironic and funny and like, because they never got to live the real stuff. They're going to see like Severance. They're going to see Severance. They're going to see The Office, and people are going to like make that back into style, right? Where you go into the office and people have these vests on, and it's like this like little cutesy kind of interactions between everyone.
Hey there, darling. You mind getting me a scotch and making it into my office a little later?
Dude, I mean, it's like it's playful. We're humans. Like we only have one life. Like we aren't meant to be this like robotic kind of substanceless like population. And I think that's the direction we've gone. I appreciate it because I want to produce a lot and I'm trying to like, do a lot of things. But yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I can go both ways on it. Shorts are sick, but I also appreciate like workplace expectations.
Tom, before you answer, I want to show you something.
So I just got dressed code during the interview, and then they decided to reschedule the interview with me for tomorrow. But before they rescheduled, the lady was like, "Would you like to come back? Like, go change it and come back?" And I was like, "No." These are the shorts.
So, shorts in the office, but Tom, shorts during an interview? Is that okay? She looks good.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, going to an interview and you got to ask, you put your best foot forward in the interview, right? And like, it's just, I understand younger generations don't have the, understanding of office environment, let's say, because if they grew up in the remote world. But going to an interview, you should at least ask a recruiter, like, hey, what's the dress code for the interview? We still tell everyone what to wear, but, and I get if you don't want to work at a place like that, totally up to you. But like, it's just one of those things. Like, what's the company's culture, and that's what you abide by. And not for nothing, and not to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but literally, when you really research dress codes and what they're for, like, honestly, they all originated from safety. No open-toed shoes, because what if there's a tragedy and you got to run out of the building and he's falling down the stairs? So, true, you know, and it all obviously started from working in factories and things like that, and it kind of carried over into the workplace. But it's just an awareness thing. Like, put your best foot forward in the interview. You know, if someone showed up to interview for my company in a tank top, probably not the greatest look, but, you know, it's every company specific.
You would have been missing out on me because I would have worn my OP tank top when I was interviewing.
You would not have done that, Virgil.
Got flip-flops on right now. Guys, this was awesome. We had a few more things to talk about, but we got quite in depth. I appreciate it. You know, talking about the Texas floods was eye-opening. GovPrep or Gov step behind. Are we prepared, or our emergency systems need help? And I think we all agree that they need help. And hey, we're here, and I think that we can play a part in this locally, federally. That's what we're doing here in this role that we play. EU censorship, I think we're sort of torn there. Let's see how that goes. We all agree that Calendly can help out, but at times it can inhibit your ability to have control. And I think shorts are just fine. Guys, thanks for joining the show. It was such a good time, and I'm going to see you next week.
Laters.
It's a huge quip. That's awesome.